to the Martinus Cosmology podcast. My name is Mary McGovern and I'm your host for today. I'm situated at the moment at the Martinus Centre in Klint during the Translators Week, and my guest today has come all the way from Spain. Her name is Else Byskov. She's a Dane who lives in Spain, and she is the author of 6 books in English about Martinus cosmology. Welcome, Else.
Thank you so much. I'm really very pleased to be here.
Tell me, Else, how did you meet Martinus cosmology?
Well, I encountered Martinus cosmology in 1995, and that was actually 5 years after we had moved to Spain. And I'd been a searching soul for my whole life, but nothing had ever really appealed to me. I wouldn't call myself a Christian. I would call myself an atheist. But still, I was searching for some higher meaning. And then, after we had moved to Spain, after 3 or 4 years, we were finally able to get our books down from Denmark. Our books had been stored at a friend's house. And the first book, a box of books that I opened, was a book written by John Engelbrecht called The Intuitive Thought. And I don't know why I grabbed it, and there was something about Martinus. And immediately I knew intuitively that this was what I had been searching for my whole life. And then very quickly we bought all the books that were available at the time. It was in Danish, so most of them were. And I read them all within a year, and they hit me like a sledgehammer. I was so taken by them. I was so enthusiastic. It was mind-blowing to me what was there. I had not expected it. It was just like so surprising. Anyway, I thought when I had read it, I'd finished reading it, I thought, whoa, this is amazing. I have to tell somebody about it. And that led me to write my first book called Death is an Illusion, a logical explanation based on Martinus's worldview. And it was so easy for me to write. I mean, it was if it was just downloaded, or I don't know. It was really, really easy. So I thought, oh, that's amazing. And then after a few trials, I managed to find a publisher in the USA, and it was published in 2002. And from then on, every time I grabbed a book by Martinus, I was inspired. I was inspired to write another book, and then another book, and so that's how it all started. And my husband was also immediately interested in it, and he read it all too. And of course, since then it's been the basis of our life together. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and I've met people in the United States who've met Martinus cosmology through your books, Death is an Illusion. That must be nice for you to hear, that people actually find your book and find their way to Martinus's own books via your book.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear. And of course, it's also now come out in German and in Spanish and in Danish. I've published it myself in Danish. I translated it myself. And I just heard today that it's the best, also in Germany, it's the best-selling secondary literature of the Martinus Verlag. So that book has apparently, I don't know, but it's, and most people say it's my best book, which I'm not in doubt about. There's probably, it appeals to a lot of people, which of course is nice.
I guess the fear of death and the whole mystery of death is very central to people's consciousness. One thing is certain in life, and that is that we will die. But what happens after death, if anything at all happens after death, is a big question. And I guess you've tapped into that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what the book is about, basically. No, basically, I could say it's a general introduction to the world, to Martinus's world picture. I think it's a pretty easy introduction to it. So it's not that difficult, of course. For some people, it might be, but I try to make it as simple as possible.
And you've also written this book called The Downfall of Marriage, The Great Transformation of Our Sexual and Marital Relations. Some people might be struck by the title, The Downfall of Marriage. It doesn't sound too optimistic. Have you had any reactions to the title?
No. The book has been received well, and it has had very good reviews on Amazon. But of course, I think many people are puzzled about it and what's it all about, which is, of course, a very relevant question, because some people think, this is another marriage counseling book, which is absolutely not. It is not about marriage counseling, and we could probably say it's the opposite. When I decided to write this book, it was, of course, based on Martinus's Livsbog, Volume 5, in which he explained our sexual pole transformation. And it's a very big subject. And it's both simple and a little bit complicated to explain. And it is impossible to understand the whole concept of the pole transformation without having as a prerequisite the idea that we do not only live once, that we live life after life after life, and during these lives we change. Our pole transformation is undergoing all the time. And what I want to say in this connection is also that the evolution of humanity from apes through primitive people through up to the people we are today is an evolution that each and every one of us has worked through. It's our personal journey. We were the animals in the jungle. We were the apes. We were the Neanderthal people. We were the people who lived in the Middle Ages. And we have a huge amount, a bank account, I call it, of experiences with us when we are reborn. And of course, all these experiences define who we are. The person we are today is a result of all those experiences that we have accumulated during our various lives. And to come back to the transformation of the sexual poles, I think I should probably just explain what it means. It means that both men and women have two poles in their mental structure. They have a pole for the female sex and a pole for the masculine sex. And if we are women, we have to go back to the animal state. Then our feminine pole is very, very strong, and our masculine pole is practically latent. There's nothing in our masculine pole. But we can imagine that these two poles are like two test tubes. And as we live life after life, the test tube for the opposite pole, the test tube for the male, if we are women, starts to be filled. So that for each life we live, the level in the test tube of the masculine pole, if we are women, will have grown a little bit. And of course, one wonders what's the whole point of this? The whole point is that we are from being one-poled human beings, we're developing into becoming double-poled human beings. And double-poled means that we will have the level of the test tubes at the same level. And that means that we are approaching the androgynous state, which means that for each life we live, our opposite pole grows a little bit, so that in 10, 12, 15 incarnations, we will have reached the point where the two poles are similar. And at that point, something very interesting will happen. Maybe I shouldn't talk about that at the moment. We can come back to that. But because, when we were more one-poled than we were today, marriage was like the foundation of our lives. It was what we all were seeking for. We wanted to have a mate with whom we could have sexual relationships and we could look after each other. We could have a family and children. And that was where all our happiness was concentrated. We had no other interest. If we go back to the purely one-pole state, the state that the animals are living in, it was all their happiness depended on their marital state, or their well, you can't call it marital when you're talking about animals, but
I think Martinus uses the term the mating state
Exactly.
when he talks about animals.
Yeah,
yes.
that was the word I was looking for, the mating state. But as we live life after life, and the opposite pole starts to grow, then we start getting other interests. We start getting interests outside the relationship and the marriage. And where there was once only one light on the hemisphere, the only light that we could see, now other little lights are beginning to be turned on. And that could be lights of interests like sports interests or interest in studying, reading, seeing your friends, going to the bars, any interest that has nothing to do with the mating state will be a sign that the opposite pole is waking up. And another interesting thing is that the growth in our intelligence is closely linked or totally depends on the growth of the opposite pole. So when the male pole in the woman starts to grow, she will get more intelligent. And the same happens for the male. When the feminine pole starts to grow in him, he will also become more intelligent. And as time goes and the level of the two test tubes sort of begins to approach its balance point, we will be much less fit for marriage. It's quite simple, so that we will have so many other interests that marriage is no longer our primary interest. And in tune with all those other interests, it becomes increasingly difficult to satisfy the demands of marriage and the demands of childcare and taking care of the house, doing the shopping, cooking, and all that. And at the same time satisfying your other new interests. And that means that the more the opposite pole grows, the more unfit we simply become for marriage. We're not very good at it. Mm. And it's very, very obvious today, because if you look at the divorce statistics, today in Denmark, I think it's 50% of all marriages that are dissolved in divorce. And in Chile, for instance, in South America, it's 70%. It is so difficult for people to keep their happiness, their marriage happiness. I mean, when we were more one-poled, we fell in love, and that being in love, that state of being in love, would last a whole lifetime. We see that, we still see some animals, for instance, a lot of birds are monogamous. They are together with the same other bird.
The same partner?
Yeah, same partner. For their whole life, and they're absolutely, totally happy. But today, because of the growth of the opposite pole, this becomes increasingly difficult. And that's why we see unhappy marriages, and Martinus calls it the zone of the unhappy marriages. And the main reason why I wrote this book was actually to see if it would help people understand what is going on, because obviously so many people are unhappy in their marital state. Either they're unhappy in their marriage, they can't make cohabitation work, or they are involuntarily single. They would really like to find a partner, but if they find one, they can't make that work either. And it's really a very, very difficult transitional state that we are living through. And I wanted primarily to tell people with this book that it is normal, but because of the almost complete ignorance about the transformation of the sexual poles, people start blaming themselves. They get self-doubt, and they think, oh, it's me, I'm not good at this, and I don't know how to make a relationship last, and they turn this frustration towards themselves and become really, really unhappy and depressed. And I think it's such a pity, because it is not their fault. The problem is that this is an organic transformation that is happening inside us, in our mental sphere, and also in our physical sphere. And it is not something that we can in any way fight or work against. The only thing we can do is try to understand it, understand that this is what is going on and that this is normal. And I think there might be a small comfort in that. And I really hope there will be. But that's not saying the same as then it becomes easy to live in marriage or becomes easy to be involuntarily single.
No, but then you know what's going on. Like, I have met people, I can think of a girl I know who was trying to do a university degree, and at the same time she had a 1-year-old that she wanted to look after, and a husband and a whole family life to take care of. And it was a terrible dilemma for her. If she wanted to finish her thesis, she had to have someone else look after her child and so on. So this conflict within her was very, very real. And I think it's a conflict many, especially women, know. It seems to mostly affect the women. But yeah, it's a very common conflict.
Yeah. And it's absolutely obvious that you cannot, on one hand, be a mother and a wife and a lover and a cook and a shopper, and on the other hand, also be a career woman and have all your friends and go jogging every day or whatever you do, and. There aren't enough hours in the day, and it's very, very frustrating for so many people. And I think that it could be a help, and I really hope it is, to find out that this is normal, and we must not blame ourselves, because we cannot help it. It is simply how it is. And I mean, this transformation of the sexual pole, it affects all of us, those who are in a happy marriage or a happy relationship, those who are not, because it changes the way we think. Because when the woman becomes more and more intellectual, of course it changes her field of interest. And if, let's say that we have a couple, and the woman, because of the growth of her intellectual capacities, she now gets a really highly paid job, and her salary is bigger than her husband's. And many men, their egos will have a hard time accepting this thing. And so what to do? And if you don't know that this transformation is happening, then you're standing being totally ignorant. And another thing that Martinus points out in relationship to this is that because of the growth of the opposite pole, when you marry somebody, you really marry a twin. On one hand, you marry the woman whose primary pole is still the biggest, but they also marry her twin. The twin is the character traits that she has in her test tube for the opposite pole that have now become so big that they are a factor in the marriage. So you don't just marry one person. You don't just marry when you're in love. You see this wonderful, great-looking, gorgeous woman, and you think, "Wow, this is who I'm marrying." But you don't see her opposite pole, and she can have. Also, even though she might be very, very feminine, she can have a really strong masculine pole. And of course, the male in the relationship, he also has a masculine pole. And those two poles, they can so easily begin to clash. Because the male thinks, based on all his previous incarnation, that he is the man of the house. And here comes the woman's masculine pole, which is now considerably big, and says, "Well, no, I don't agree. No, let's do this in a different way or something." And this can be really, really hard for the man to accept and to understand. And there's also the problem with the sexual attraction, because obviously you have your primary pole. Let's say a woman has her feminine pole, and she's attracted to her husband, to her partner, with her feminine pole, and she's attracted to his masculine pole. But as his masculine pole is maybe not so big anymore, and her feminine pole has also sort of given way to her masculine pole, there's less to be attracted with. They're not like desperately wanting to have sex with each other, like maybe we did 500 years ago. I don't know how long. Anyway, so the sexual attraction becomes more complicated. And of course, obviously, you cannot be attracted to a man with your male pole. That's impossible. So it can all get pretty complicated. And and what can I say? When there's also this example that a woman, she marries, let's say she marries a soft man whose feminine pole is quite big, quite strong. He's very sort of soft-spoken. He gives in. He's very kind. He takes care of the house. He takes care of the kids. He does his shopping. And maybe she has a high-profile job and she brings in a lot of money, and he's at home and takes care of the house. And of course that's very practical, but it does not feed her sexual desire, because she cannot be attracted to a housewife in an apron, which he has become. And that, of course, creates all sorts of problems also. So it's complicated, and I think if there's if there's any piece of advice that can be given in this situation, is that we should let each other have their specific interests, but also you should, of course, be able to do something together. And that's where the problem is. If you don't do anything together in the end, then why be together? Of course, there can be children, but it's not easy for the children either, because then all the divorces, and today it's practically impossible to find teenagers whose parents are still together.
So having a common interest can feed the opposite pole in both parts in the marriage.
Yes.
So the sexual attraction belongs to the primary pole, so the male pole in the man and the female pole in the woman, and any common interests feed the female pole in the man and the male pole in the woman. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, because when you have your opposite poles and all your intellectual capacities are attached to your opposite pole. And for instance, in my own marriage, my husband and I, we are both quite intellectual. So we have a lot of intellectual interests together. And that, of course, is part of what keeps our marriage together. That we can do all sorts of things and have fun and all that. So it's very important to set time aside to at least cultivate some common interests, because otherwise it's really difficult. It really is.
And of course, the honeymoon doesn't last forever. In English, the honeymoon, it's like the word implies just one night. In Swedish, it's a month. It has varying lengths of time in different languages, but at least it implies that this blissful state at the beginning of being married, where you're really totally in love, and the only thing in the world that matters is your partner, it doesn't last forever. So if there aren't any common interests, that could be a problem.
Absolutely.
When this state of being in love falls away. Yeah. Is that your experience?
Oh, absolutely. I think the latest statistics I read was that the honeymoon period now lasts, they say 2 years, which I think it might be an exaggeration. But it at least after 1 or 2 years, the honeymoon period is over. It's gone. You no longer see your partner through these pink-colored glasses. You see him or her in the bare light of the bare, grim reality. And that is maybe not so nice. And now you have to redefine your whole relationship. Because when you're in love, it's easy. It's easy, you desire each other sexually, you love each other, you hold hands, etc. But once this Disney dust, if I can call it that, has been removed, you have to really look high and low to find something to keep your marriage relationship together, whatever it might be. It could be you can read a book together and discuss it, or you can go and see a theater or an opera or whatever, something that will keep you together. And then it's fine. I know my own relationship is exactly based on that. I have my interests, he has his interests, and then we have common interests. Of course, we also have children, so that is also a common interest. But I think without that, it can be really difficult. And the whole point of writing this book is that I wanted to tell people that this is normal. And don't despair. Really, don't despair. Because we are undergoing an organic transformation that very, very few people are aware of. Martinus is the only person in the world who has revealed this transformation of the sexual poles. And then some people might say, well, he can be wrong, this is not what's going on. But it is exactly what is going on. I mean, look around you, look at the world, look at all the unhappy relationships. You can see that this is going on. And you can also see from the way the women, like you call them estrogen tornadoes, they overtake many males in the high-profile jobs in the business world. And I mean, nobody can claim that this is not happening. Because when we look back at our mothers, they were housewives. They weren't like CEOs or something.
Yes, I know your husband's a dentist, and I think I'm right in saying that now there are more female dentists in Denmark than male dentists.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
So that's a kind of high-profile job that's been taken over by women, more or less.
Yeah. No doubt about it. No, many more females are dentists today. Many more than men. It's as if the men have been sort of pushed, because there are also really many female doctors and lawyers and politicians. It's as if the males have been pushed into business life. Like they then go and work in big companies or whatever. So there is definitely something going on here. And I think it's important to know that this will define us, not only as persons, but it will also define our societies. And what is happening is that in tune with the growth of the opposite pole, and this is so important, our ability to demonstrate universal love also grows. Because when we were one-poled, we only had one accomplish, if I can call it that, in the battle of life, and that was our mating partner. And all the rest of the world was a war zone. Everything was dark out there. The other males were only out to take our wife from us, or our house, or our belongings, or whatever. But as the opposite pole grows, our ability to love other beings also grows. And this means that when we go out into the world today, we make friends so easily. We make friends everywhere. And it's become a much nicer world in that respect. And of course, we go out into the world, we go out into our workplace, and there we meet other people who are really nice. And then Martinus also says that because we still have the ability to fall in love, that ability will disappear with time, but we still have it. We can become turned on very easily towards those colleagues that we might have, or friends that we meet out in the world. We meet them at bars or at our workplace, in the canteen, wherever. And it's easy, because then we can very easily get tempted to have a little affair. Oh, I'll have a little affair. I'm a bit fed up with my husband. He's really boring. And we think we can get away with it. And then, of course, once we embark on such an affair, and we know today that really many people do, they have extramarital affairs. But that is undermining, obviously, for the marriage. I mean, you cannot have your pie and eat it too. So in that way, you're also in a way not being helped by the transformation of the sexual poles. It makes it much easier for you to get turned on, to fall for the temptation of having an affair, And then you don't really think about the people, that your children and your husband, that you are now letting down. And of course, that is not a very nice trait of your personality. And it will almost always go wrong.
Perhaps it could be good to clarify that Martinus says that our ability to fall in love and stay in love decreases with this pole transformation. But that results in us having lots of relationships. And it seems paradoxical because people are falling in love all the time, but their ability to remain in love degenerates, where in the past people could be in love for their whole life, or even 2 lives or 3 lives.
Precisely.
He talks about people coming back who have a very close relationship, coming back to this life, who've maybe been together in their previous lives. So it seems like a paradox, but this business of having one affair after another shows a degeneration in the ability to remain in love. It's a terminology. It's almost a language question, because he talks about, it's a difficult thing to say in English if we translate his term, but there's a difference between falling in love and remaining in love.
Absolutely.
And that's where the difference lies. So we can fall in love many, many times, but the ability to remain in love certainly degenerates.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I meant when I said that after 2 years or 1 year, when the honeymoon is over, that is when you must really, really do everything you can to love the person you are now with, and not just rely on the Disney dust. And hopefully there will be something in that person that you actually can love. And then you can make cohabitation work. But if you suddenly see that the other person is actually not a really nice person, and there's a lot wrong with him or her, then it becomes really, really difficult. And I mean, maybe we should go on to talk about the other effect of our growing ability to demonstrate and feel universal love. And that is, of course, that the more you are able to feel universal love, the more people you can love. And you can now no longer restrict your love to people of your own sex. And today we call it homosexuality, but I really don't think it's a very good term. I would rather call it pansexuality, that you become so all-loving that you can fall for. You still have the ability to fall in love, and it doesn't matter what outer sex that person has. It's completely irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. And Martinus is the only person who has ever offered a real explanation for how homosexuality or pansexuality arises, and why. Because why? Why do some people suddenly turn their sexual desire towards a person of their own sex? Nobody knows why. Some people think it's an illness, and in some countries you get executed and all sorts of things. And it is an absolutely and totally normal effect of the transformation of the sexual poles. There's absolutely nothing unnatural about it. And the sooner we realize this, the better we will be able to understand those people who have been so persecuted, who have been so looked down upon. It's absolutely horrible, and it is so groundless. But an understanding of the transformation of the sexual poles really explain not only why our marriages are in danger, but also why homosexuality exists and why it's on its rise, because there are many more homosexuals. And I'm sure that in 100 and in 200 years, we will not talk about this. It's not an issue.
No, and if you talk to young people in Denmark today, it's probably not like this in many other countries, but in Denmark, then they will say homosexuality is not an issue anymore. No. But it certainly is in other countries. Yeah. So the cultures differ very much on this matter.
Yeah. And I mean, not everybody if we look at our whole evolution, and we're all approaching the point when our two poles, our masculine and feminine poles, will be in balance. And once we reach that point, we will get cosmic consciousness, or what Martinus calls it. We will experience the great birth, is what he calls it. We can also say that it is the conclusion of the prophecy that God said, "I will make man in my image," and we will become a man in the image and likeness of God. It sounds very big, and it is very big. Let me just underline that. It really is very big. And we are all approaching that point. But on the way, and we are now on the way, we still have some inclination to go. It all depends, because not everybody has come equally far in their pole transformation. But once we on our way to this balance point, some people will remain with their primary pole in the lead, which means that if you're a woman, you will still want to be together with a man as long as that lasts. Or you can also decide or fall for somebody of your own sex. But again, here it must be underlined that your opposite pole is growing so much that your own sexual identity is wavering. It's wavering, because you may look like a woman, and you will look like a woman, because that is how the body that you get will still mostly have female traits. But you will also yourself very much be in your opposite pole. So, I mean, both possibilities are there. You can become homosexual or live together with somebody who looks like your own sex, or you can go on being together with a person of the opposite sex. And so there's nothing unnatural in either of these. It's only just before we reach the balance of the poles, that we will understand and know how a person feels in the opposite pole. I mean, I will know how a man feels and thinks, and the man will know how a woman feels and thinks. And at that point, we have become completely androgynous persons, beings. And when we reach that point, we are talking about a totally different race, I can almost say. We'll be so different we can't even understand it. But obviously, it's a very, very, very long process, and it expands over thousands and thousands of lives. And at this point, that it's as if at this point in time, it's been going on for so long that it's been breaking through the sound barrier, if I can call it that. And it's now becoming obvious that something is afoot. We can see it everywhere. And that's why I think it's so important to know that somebody has actually explained this. And we can become knowledgeable about it. We can know what's going on. And that's why I wrote this book, because I think it's really life-changing once you understand that you're in this process and that you are not abnormal because you can't make your relationship work. Mm-hmm. And you have to find other things that define your happiness, because we are still living in times when marriage is still considered the big thing to do, and you know, the women's magazines, and your mother asks you, when are you getting married, and all that. But this whole idea of marriage is based on a polar structure that may be 100 or 200 years old. So we are totally behind. I mean, our traditions are so lacking behind our actual state, the actual state we're on. And we still think, oh, I have to get married, and whoa, and I must do everything I can to make this big day fantastic, and a lot of money is spent, and I don't know what. And do these marriages last? No, they don't. They don't. I mean, the more expensive the wedding has been, the shorter time the marriage lasts, because it's so difficult for us today.
A friend of mine once said He couldn't be bothered going to any more of his son's marriages.
No, exactly. Exactly, yeah. Yeah. My son was also married. Big thing and lots of money. And how long did it last? A year and a half or something? Yeah. So
what you're saying is Martinus describes basically three sexes. He talks about the male being, the female being, and the creation of an entirely new being, which is this real human being in God's image.
yes.
In the Bible it says man in God's image, but man in God's image is not a man.
No.
It's this real human being.
Yes.
And this is what we're on our way to. And of course there are many people who couldn't dream of getting married in this life. They prefer to be single, but they can get a lot of criticism from their surroundings, a lot of lack of understanding. Why do you not get married? And of course this can also be explained by the growth of the opposite pole and one's other interests. So maybe your book could be a comfort for people in that kind of situation too.
I really hope that, and I also hope that the world picture of Martinus will become better known in whichever way, because it is such a fantastic world picture. It is so mind-blowing, and it is so life-changing. And I mean, my life changed completely after I encountered it. I cannot explain how it has changed my life in every way. I've become so much happier. It's the most happiness-generating work that has ever been written, because it is so logical and it explains so many things. It answers all the big questions and then some. It really is a totally amazing work. And I just wish that more people could get the same pleasure from it that I have myself. And about this new sex, you said, yes, that is actually what will happen. Once we reach the point when our poles are in balance, we will be completely different people. We will be all loving people who will live to serve others, and the world will be an amazing place. It will be a fantastic place. And so many people think, the world we won't have in 100 years, we will have destroyed the earth and there will be no more humanity and we will all be dead. No, that is not what is going to happen, not according to Martinus. We are approaching a world where everybody, but this will of course happen gradually, everybody will achieve cosmic consciousness, and it will be a world inhabited by cosmic conscious people. And imagine what kind of world that will be. There will be no more greed, there will be no more money, there will be no more war, there will be no more poverty, there will be no more hunger and starvation. It will be a wonderful world, and we are on our way to that. And Martinus also says that we are now in the throes of birth. We're in the birth throes, and of course all births are painful, and that is exactly what we are experiencing. This is a very painful period for us all to be in, because one, we don't understand it, and we can't really do a lot about it. And I think also the perspective that we don't only live one life, but we are eternal beings. It gives you a totally different outlook, obviously. I mean, when you pass over, you don't die. You may lose your physical body, but you are not your physical body. You are primarily a spiritual being, and you always have your spiritual body. At times you also have a physical body that when you reincarnate into a physical organism. And I mean, the whole outlook and perspective that you get on life by reading Martinus's work is simply mind-blowing. It is so conducive to being happy.
Well, on that very happy note, and very optimistic note, I think we will stop for today. Thank you very much, Else Byskov, for joining us. People can find your works on your homepage. Maybe you could tell us what your homepage is called?
Yeah. My website is called newspiritualscience.com, and there you can see all my books. And you can also find a small introduction to who Martinus was. It's not very big, but I also have references to the website of the Martinus Institute, which is in Copenhagen. And it's just a portal for the Martinus work in general. And I also have a blog where every month I write a new blog, which often reflects answers to the big questions like what happens when we die, or how do we create a happy fate, or what's it all about, and where are we coming from, and where are we going, and is there a God, and what should I what kind of thoughts should I think to stay healthy, and etc.
So there's plenty of material for listeners who want to study further. Thank you very much for joining us.
It was a pleasure.